was a pretty one-sided affair here as we take a look at our backup match here between Gabriel and Sandro. You've got Mr. Costa-Giomi up a game with Esper control over black-white mid-range. Things do get much more difficult after sideboard for him, though.
Yeah, so moving over to how the black-white mid-range deck works, we've like I said, we saw it get very popular about a month ago. It's very similar to the mono-black deck in how it plays. When you look at it out of the sideboard, it really gets to board out all these extra removal spells it has, boarding cards like 3 Duresses, an Erebos, 2 Sin Collectors, and along with Revoke Existences, so it can actually answer cards like Detention Sphere in the matchup. So this does get more difficult for the Esper control deck.
Quick update for you guys really quickly before we move to this match. Aaron Barrich does defeat Robert Rivero. You've got the Naya aggro deck defeating red-white burn. So for you burn fans out there, you're both out of the top 8 now. It was a good run, though.
We said before, burn putting 2 decks in the top 8 certainly had a good showing. It was pretty unfortunate in the decks it drew in the top 8, being paired up against both green-white aggro and Naya aggro. In general, unflinching courage decks are difficult for the burn deck to deal with.
Yeah, it's actually kind of ironic to run into 2 unflinching courage decks when unflinching courage is just seeing little to no play in the format, and then that's your pairing in the elimination rounds. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a card that of all the decks to be paired against, there's your mono blacks and your mono blues and everything else that's really popular and standard. 2 unflinching courage decks, really? That's how things are going to go for me? But the answer is a resounding yes, and that's why they're both out of the top 8. Green, white, and Naya moving on so far. Barrich going to play against the winner of the mono black Devotion Mirror. I wonder how he feels about his matchup there.
Well, I can't imagine it's as strong of a matchup as it is against the burn deck. But that said, Barrich, when we got to speak to him in the sideboard yesterday, said he really liked his mono black matchup, thanks in part to the fact that he has a transform sideboard into a partial transform into a hexproof deck.
Yep. Can probably catch those players by surprise. Well, at least yesterday.
Yeah.
During the elimination rounds, of course, both players have access to each other's deck lists, so that won't be a surprise for whoever he plays against, either Edgar or Schoolcraft in the semifinals. But it is a pretty sweet transformational sideboard plan that I'm sure he caught a lot of people off guard with.
Yeah, cards like main deck Witch Stalker tend to be pretty good against what Mono Black's trying to do.
I just like the fact that he's putting a lot of pressure on Mono Black's Devour Fleshes in the games. It's very important that they have them. They have like a lot of them to be able to beat Barich's deck and his plan.
Yeah, even a simple curve like Voice of Resurgence into Witch Stalker can be very difficult for the Mono Black deck to deal with, because Devour Flesh now is really not a likely candidate to ever get to kill the Witch Stalker.
Yeah. And as far as like the game 1 matchup would go too, Michael Edgar is the player with the main deck Nightveil Specters, and I'm sure that's the one that Barrich would prefer to play against, as opposed to Nicholas Schoolcraft, who has the main deck Lifebane Zombies. Just that minor edge is actually pretty important.
Yeah, what Lifebane Zombie means is that when he's on the play, the black player actually has a way to deal with Witch Stalker, or an additional way other than just the Thought Seizes.
Game 2 here will be underway in just a moment for you guys. Don't forget the Mono Black Mirror. We'll have an update for you guys exactly how that's going as soon as we do know. Looks like they're still in game number 1 right now, but I'm still with you. I think that Edgar is the favorite, especially in game 1, because he has Nightveil Specters, where Schoolcraft has Lifebane Zombie. It's got to give you a pretty big edge.
I would certainly think so. So going to this matchup, as far as the black-white mid-range decks go, this is certainly one of the dual-colored versions of them. Looking at the cards that he has, he's playing Packrat, Bloodbaron, and Obzedat, and Desecration Demon as his creatures, so he's not so white as to play the Bramazes in this version. But other than that, it's mostly what you'd expect out of a black-white mid-range deck. It does have 2 Elspeths, in addition to the usual suspects in black cards from the mono black decks. Your Thought Seizes, your Downfalls, Bioblights, Underworld Connections. Yeah,
this is we've seen other versions of this deck with a much heavier white component. As you did mention, there are versions that do play Bramaz, Obzedat, things of that nature. This one is just touching on white, so it depends just how you want to go with the deck, but this one is a rather modest approach. But it's going to still play the same game as a mono black Devotion, the black-red version would play against a Sanction's Revelation style deck, which is make you discard like crazy, try to resolve a card draw, or Underworld Connections or Erebos, and just go from there. The game plan is all the same, even though the colors are a little stretched. So it looks like both players are happy. We're going to start things off here in game number 2 with a Temple of Silence. Scry is going to put the top 2 to the bottom for Bernabe. Costa-Giomi going to draw his card. He's got a Godless Shrine. couple Temple of Enlightenments as well. So if you're the Esper player in this matchup, what are you trying to accomplish?
Well, I mean, a lot of the pressure here is, well, first of all, you're going to get Thoughtseize and Duress, and there's not anything you can really do about that. So that's something you just have to be aware of. You'd like to keep hands with a lot of redundancy. What you want to do is stop Bernabe from being able to resolve one of his card drawers. That means particularly Underworld connections you don't want to have happen early. Because he's playing the black-white mid-range deck, that what also happens is what he's going to try to do is he's going to try to clear the way for a card like Obsidat. He's going to use Duresses and Thoughtseizes to take your counter spells and then get Obsidat through. So what that means is that cards like Thoughtseize, which you see Costa-Giomi playing, are actually really strong in the matchup. So it's a way you can get rid of a card like Obsidat or Rip of Erebos without having to leave up counter spells.
I was going to say, I bet he didn't expect to be Thoughtseize, so now you're going to take a look at a hand of an Obsidat, a Desecration Demon, actually 2 copies of Obsidat, Underworld Connections, and some other fun stuff here. So actually a pretty good hand here for Sandro. Needs a little bit more mana, but that's what the Connections is actually there to do. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the card that's taken via Thoughtseize. It seems like the best card at this juncture.
Yeah, it is the best card right now. If Costa-Giomi has a lot of Detention Spheres in his hand, he can go ahead and take an Obsidat. But as you see here, he is going to go with Underworld Connections.
I like this. It actually forces Sandro to draw a lot of lands now.
Exactly. Thunderbolt Connections was the most castable card there, and it was still one of the most important cards in the matchup. You see no more lands on Bernabe's side. He actually drew a Blood Baron, so right now he has kind of an embarrassment of 5 drops. I imagine if he resolves any 2 of those, it should be good enough.
Yeah, if he ever gets to that point. He's going to have to run off some lands here. That was another copy of Obsidat. Wow. Just has to pass the turn back here. So if you're Costa-Giomi, you want to take advantage of this somehow, some way. Maybe try to get a Jace down and just minus it. He's just going to play a Temple of Silence and Scry. That card's going to stay on top. Again, I really like the idea here of just forcing Bernabe to just draw lands to get himself back into the game. Sin Collector's not a bad find here in the interim.
Yeah, and you said resolving something like a Jace, it's good. He does know there's a Hero's Downfall hiding out in Bernabe's hand, so his cards won't have, yeah.
Like, I'm okay with that, though. Like, if you play...
minus 2 it.
Yeah, like, if you play a Jace, you minus it, he gets Hero's Downfall. Do you make that exchange? Because that exchange is probably going to happen anyway. And plus, if you have an Elspeth, which he does have, then, you know, you get to resolve that, and chances are that there won't be another Hero's Downfall immediately for that. So Elspeth could actually take you to victory.
Yeah, there is a concern that if you minus it, it'll just die to Mutavault, and then the downfall will take your Elspeth. So you may just have to plus a Jace so that it gets downfalled.
That's true.
If you're trying to clear the way for Elspeth. But then again, that's a fine thing to be doing.
Yep. So Sin Collector has the option here between Dark Betrayal and Sphinx's Revelation. I think Revelation is the pretty easy grab here. Dark Betrayal can trade for the Sin Collector, or you can just hold that Dark Betrayal for a little while longer because you know that your opponent has 2 copies of Obsidat in your hand, so you can actually trade for one of those. Dissolve the draw here for Costa-Giomi. He's going to play Temple of Silence. Take a look at the top card. He's going to leave that on top.
And really the most important card in this matchup, as it is in a lot of matchups, is the Sphinx's Revelation in Costa-Giomi's deck. You know, he can resolve cards like Elspeth, but they do get Heroes Downfalled a lot. He can resolve Jaces, he can hold back counter spells, but it's when he really gets to win the game is when he starts drawing extra cards.
Yep. If he can just fade some discard spells, which he was unable to do. I mean, also have Sin Collector too, so there are a lot of discard spells coming from Bernabe.
So land 4 was drawn on Bernabe's side. Remember, once land 5 hits the table, you have a Blood Baron and 3 Obsidats.
Yeah, it's going to be time to cast Mythics. Ooh, an Aetherling got picked up.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
The other thing Costa-Giomi can do in this matchup, other than establish control of the board, is he can just Aetherling his opponent. Black-white midrange does not have too many ways to deal with an Aetherling.
Yeah, the problem right now, as you're going to see an Elspeth get dropped, is that he only has 2 blue mana, so he needs to find 1 more blue mana at least. Probably wants to find 2 just to be safe. As here is Elspeth, that's going to tick up. Probably going to die in just a moment to the Hero's Downfall, and there that is. But 3 soldiers will get made for 6 mana.
Yeah, and that clears the Hero's Downfall out of Bernabe's hand, which means if you're Costa-Giomi, it's actually, that's 1 less removal spell that your Aetherling has to play around.
Yep. Bile to draw here. You don't see that left in a ton, but part of the reason you do see it left in is so it can actually clear off Elspeth tokens. So it can actually do that this turn. It's not the most exciting turn, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a Bile to kill your tokens, fire at Mutavault, get you for 4. Additionally, we could just see Desecration Demon get cast, but I'm not in love with Demon in this situation. I think it's
yeah,
okay.
If your opponent has 3 1-drops, Demon's not at its best. This is why the Bile Blight was kept in, so even though the play seems unimpressive, if you've left in Bile Blight, it means you're just happy with this exchange.
Yeah. And it's not like he left it a ton of Bile Blights, but this exchange can actually come up sometimes. There are also situations where your opponent is Elspething like crazy. They actually emblem in the new Bile Blight the tokens way, and you've effectively dealt with the Elspeth, as now here is Aetherling with 1 single blue mana available. So if you're Sandro, you got to find that 5th land like this turn, and he did, but it comes into play tapped.
Yes, he's going to take some damage off the Aetherling. He still might be able to race it. There's been a lot of incremental damage dealt this game, actually. So, you see Costa-Giomi's actually down to 10. So thanks to the blinking ability of Obsidat, it may be good enough. We'll have to see.
And this is the exact reason that I like just the Street Mono Black version, because even though the white cards that you get access to are quite powerful, there are games like this one that we're watching right now where it's so important for you to actually cast the spells on time. And because you have Orzhov, Guildgate, and Temple of Silence, this is what can happen. You draw your 5th land, it comes into play tapped, and that's an issue.
Yeah, we see Desecration Demon then is the play for Bernabe. And he just has a lot of power on the board. Costa-Giomi's not out of the woods yet. Having the Aetherling in play certainly helps him. And actually, he is able to see, he does have that 1 Dissolve remaining and Dark Betrayal. So I feel like Costa-Giomi's going to be able to buy enough time to get 3 swings in with that Aetherling.
His blue mana is just being worked overtime, though. He doesn't have a ton of it. Aetherling requires a decent amount of blue mana. I guess at this point, Sandro doesn't really have much in the way of removal. So I don't think Aetherling's going to die, but he does have to manage it just with the fact of blinking it out and blocking and things of that nature, and also making it unblockable to attack too. So we'll see exactly what Costa-Giomi can do, because it looks like he wants to go unblockable style to actually force through some damage, but that might be a little more difficult than you would like it to be. Now he's looking at Dark Betrayal.
If you look at it, I like the Dark Betrayal play. He only has 3 blue mana sources. So he's going to go ahead and Dark Betrayal the Demon, and he's not going to unblockable the Aetherling, because he wants to leave up 1 blue for protection and 2 more for the Dissolve.
Do you like chump blocking here? I was actually going to bring this up. It buys you some time.
Absolutely. I think your 5 drops are trying to win you the game. Aetherling represents a 3-turn clock, and if you let it in for 4 damage, then it goes 4-8-8. It can still be a 3-turn clock.
Revoke Existence to draw here for Bernabe. He's going to play Obsidat number 1. I think we both know this isn't resolving, so there is a Dissolve. But there are more of those coming. The big question here is what Dissolve finds.
Yeah, I mean, if Costa-Giomi can find another counter spell, that should be lights out.
I mean, even if I'm him, like, if it's not another counter spell, I'd be cool with just another blue mana. Picks up an island.
He asks for another blue mana, and he draws the island.
He plays Hallowed Fountain, tap that turn. And now it looks like maybe he's fired up Mutavault, potentially. Yeah, he's going to be really aggressive, and I think he can afford to be. He wants to close this out as fast as he possibly can.
Yeah, well, this is a full 10 damage. It does mean that, so they're now at 10 apiece. We don't, if you're Costa-Giomi, you don't know what Bernabe's next play is. It's going to be Obsidat, which is going to put him out of range of a lethal attack next turn.
Erebos was the draw step, but that one doesn't matter now. There are much more important things taking place here.
Yeah, Aetherling really changed the pacing of this game here.
Surprise, surprise.
Well, it's interesting. Normally, like, I actually originally when I was trying to find ways to beat Black-White midrange with the Esper deck, I wanted to get this like full control lock going on, but that's actually pretty hard to assemble against Black-White. They have so many cards that are really hard to deal with, whether it's Obsidat by itself, Blood Baron, Whip plus Obsidat, Erebos, Underworld Connections, that a lot of the times you actually can't win the late game with Esper. They will claw their way back in and actually grab control of the board from you. So the best way to get control is oftentimes just to play Aetherling and maybe even have more than one of them in your list.
Well, what I like about Aetherling in the matchup is what Black-White tries to do is just try to grind you out. I'm going to whip it. But a lot of the time what happens is they try to grind you out, but it's very mana intensive in how they try to grind you out. So they're not playing a ton of spells in one turn. They're doing one big effect every single turn. Aetherling forces their hand once it actually shows up to actually, quit messing around. You actually have to try to get me dead now.
Yeah, as we see, what Bernabe right now has a 4-drop and a 3 5-drops and is still in his hand.
Yeah.
And that's not going to matter anymore. The game has been reduced to about 2 turns on each side.
Quick update for you guys. Nicholas Schoolcraft does win game number 1 over Michael Edgar. That game did just conclude in the Mono Black Devotion Mirror, so a little bit longer than I expected it to go. But the player actually with Lifebane Zombie does win game number 1. It's a touch surprising.
Yeah, I mean, Nightveil Spectre certainly is better than Lifebane Zombie in the matchup. That said, because both players play a lot of cards like Thoughtseize, it may not matter which one Like, as long as they're both thought seizing away each other's cards, then it still can come down to an Underworld Connections fight or a Pack Rat fight.
Bernabe going to go with a Blood Baron as opposed to an Obsidat this turn. So he had to choose between one of the Mythics. He goes with this one. And what that does is it actually just shuts down the old Mutavault from attacking. But unfortunately for him, what it'll also do is it'll turn on Aetherling's ability to block and then go hiding. So unblockable is going to happen here. See how much he wants to attack for. Looks like quite a bit.
Yeah, it's going to be a swing for 7, it looks like.
Yep.
You're absolutely right, backing it up to 6, that he can blink the Aetherling and use the Aetherling to block and blink it again to deny Bernabe the life gain.
Costa-Giomi picked up a copy of Syncopate for the turn as well.
And that counterspell should be enough to get him the rest of this game here.
I think he's just trying to manage the Aetherling right now, figure out exactly how much I'm supposed to attack for. He doesn't have to be overly aggressive with the card right now. It's still a 2-turn clock, almost any way you slice it. And he is going to blink out Aetherling after the 6 damage is dealt, so it's going to go hiding. It'll come back in just a moment.
Jumps into the Aether, comes back out of the Aether onto the battlefield.
Bernabe's going to draw his card. That's a Mutavault. And again, as powerful as the cards are in his hand, again, he's got an Erebos, he's got multiple copies of Obsidat, a Revoke Existence if a Detention Sphere ever showed up. The big issue here is that he was not able to convert those resources and get them into play in time.
Yeah, even if Blood Baron were to somehow connect through Aetherling, then Bernabe would go up to 8, he'd get his Obsidat countered, and we'd see a swing from Aetherling for lethal next turn.
Yeah. And truth be told, I don't think the Syncopate was necessary. It just puts a huge check mark on the game. It makes it so much easier once he actually does pick up a counterspell in that situation.
Gabriel has the board covered with Aetherling, and the Syncopate has really any play covered as well.
Yeah. And Bernabe's going to go through the iterations right now. Again, he's looking at 2 copies of Obsidat, an Erebos, a Revoke Existence, and a Mutavault, trying to figure out what he can do to get himself out of this situation. And even if he had resolved Obsidat last turn, I'm not sure how much it would have done. It would have been perfectly fine. And I think that may have been the route that I would have went, just because I don't think it's feasible to expect Blood Baron to actually get the job done here. Yeah, you're going to see a snap block, and it's just going to bounce out. So it's not going to actually get to gain any life. And now Sandro will get to deploy one more spell this game, but as you mentioned, the Syncopate's going to cover whatever it is. He can't counter it
unless
fast
it costs
enough.
2.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. It's 5. He goes for the Obsidat. Obsidat is countered by Syncopate, and that is the match for Gabriel Costa-Giomi.
So Mr. Costa-Giomi is moving on. Our 8th seed squeaked in yesterday, winning his last round in an Esper Control mirror. He's winning again. Does defeat Sandro Bernabe. 2-0, Esper Control. Is going to do battle against green-white aggro. Got to think he likes his matchup there.
Yeah, I mean, some of the aggro decks can be difficult.